fantastic launch of the GSLV Mark 3 rocket with the Chandrayaan payload. It's going to be absolutely fantastic if India is able to achieve these dreams. What's this mission all about? What took place? Have a look at this story.
India's geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle Mark 3 streaking through the sky at 2:43 p.m., taking the Chandrayaan 2 satellite into the Earth's orbit. ISRO had missed the last opportunity on the 15th of July when the launch was aborted 56 minutes before the liftoff due to a snag which was fixed in 48 hours by ISRO.
Now, having injected the satellite or Chandrayaan 2 in the intended orbit and better than that orbit, and we will work together and will ensure that we making the Indian flag flying high in this specific technology area.
The moon-bound 3.8-ton Chandrayaan 2 satellite will take several rounds of the Earth before being shot off onto its 3.84 lakh kilometer journey to the moon. It is then slowed down so that the moon's gravity can capture it. The composite body spends several days in the moon orbit. On ISRO's command, the Vikram lander and the Pragyan rover is released to land on the lunar surface. The Vikram lander starts its journey dubbed the 15 minutes of terror to the lunar surface. The orbiter and the lander together search for the best site to land using onboard cameras. The lander comes in for its final approach to land on the lunar surface. India's flag reaches the lunar surface and the Pragyan rover starts its long but slow lunar walk. The Prime Minister congratulated scientists for the bounce back. There are more tricky steps in the mission that will last 48 days, and the crucial bit will be when the Vikram lander goes into land on the lunar surface to place India's flag on the moon. This is the most terrifying 15 minutes for ISRO.
What you see is the trail of the geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle as it took Chandrayaan 2 up. The journey is long, but well begun is half done. With camera person Alexander Edwin in Sriharikota, Pallav Bagla for NDTV.
Well, we're going to be joined by our panel in a few moments from now, and we've got incredible scientists from India and around the world. But let me tell you what exactly happened so far and what's going to happen from here onwards. At 2:43 this afternoon, the 22nd of July, Chandrayaan 2 blasted off. At 16.2 minutes, Chandrayaan separated from the rocket. So it all happened within a period of 16 minutes between the blast off and the time that the time when the satellite actually exited the rocket. Now, till day 23, Chandrayaan will orbit Earth, and soon after that it's going to be a slingshot maneuver, and it's going to be on the lunar orbit before ultimately that happens. On day 48 or September 7th, the lander and the rover will land on the moon. So there's still a ways to go, but that's what's happened so far. Let's go straight across now to Pallav Bagla, our science editor. I'm also joined by Mr. Raghunandan of the Delhi Science Forum. Thanks so very much for being with us. And Ajay Lele, research fellow at the Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis with me as well. Also, other panelists joining me at this juncture. But first, let me go across to you, Pallav. What exactly, one of the things which struck me most about today, Pallav, was the determination of the ISRO chairman to actually say that, look, we had a problem a few days back, but there is no doubt about the fact that we are going to succeed in blasting off today. Does this have a great deal to do with the 6 Sigma standard of certification that ISRO operates with? That all of these technologies, all of these rockets, satellites, everything is developed to a point when the chances of failure are quite remote.
Well, I don't think it is Six Sigma just yet, but the level of confidence which was shown by ISRO in bouncing back from a launch which was aborted just 1 week ago to have a successful launch today, I think was remarkable. It was very clear in the minds of the scientists at ISRO, and well before the President of India left Sriharikota, they had figured out what had gone wrong, why they had to abort that launch, and well before the President of India reached Delhi, they had started emptying the rocket of its liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, and they fixed the problem in 48 hours, as Dr. Sivan said in the post-launch address which he made. And after that, it was up to the scientists who maintained the launch pad to send Chandrayaan up into space, and they bounced back. It was very clear in my mind also that ISRO would definitely bounce back. It was not a failure on last Monday, it was only a setback, and every time there has been setbacks and failures at ISRO, they have learned and they have come back very strongly. So today what I saw was great determination on part of the scientists at ISRO, and people who were present in the control room very clearly told me that when the abort happened, the scientists were unruffled, and today when the success happened, they were as unruffled. So it's a professional bunch of people, 100-odd scientists in the Mission Control Center, who made sure that Chandrayaan 2 lifted off at 2:43 p.m. and it's on its way and journey towards the moon. It's a long haul. This is the first step, and we should still wait and watch what happens in the next weeks and months.
Well, joining us now, M. Annadurai, the former director of the ISRO Satellite Center. No doubt a moment of incredible pride for you in having been associated for ISRO for as long as you have. We'll talk about the satellite and the lunar mission in a moment, but tell us a little bit about GSLV itself. We've had problems earlier on with the GSLV, but this is the GSLV Mark III, which is far better than the earlier variants. Does this give us the confidence to make GSLV Mark III very much the bedrock upon which ISRO can plan future missions?
Yeah, the incredible step what it has taken in this first operational flight for the moon, Chandrayaan 2, but definitely it gives confidence because by design, definitely Mark III is much better than the Mark II. Across ISRO boards, this has been discussed, but now this has been consolidated by the first mission going to the moon by GSLV Mark III. Definitely this shows it's a maturity of the design, maturity of the system, and again it's it allowed the ISRO team within a week to come back and to go for an ambitious mission like Chandrayaan 2. So definitely this gives a really a shot in the arm so that the future missions, even in the name of Chandrayaan and beyond, I think Mark III is going to be a workhorse, and definitely GSLV Mark III is going to join in its junior PSLV for the reliable and robust mission is concerned. Sure. Definitely this particular mission showed the way, yes, it can happen.
Okay. Mr. Raghunandan, what is this mission all about? What exactly are we trying to do?
I think there's three things which are important about it. The specific objective is to find out more about the moon, to map the moon's surface, to look for potential landing sites, as well as potential sites for more permanent or stations on the moon, which means locating water on the moon. So that is one. But I think equally important is the fact that ISRO has now started embarking on a journey of space exploration which takes it away from the mainstream path of space work in India, which has essentially been applied science, looking for practical applications back on Earth.
Right.
Remote sensing, yes, communications, telephony.
This is more pure science.
This is now doing more curiosity-driven science. And I think ISRO will be doing more of that in future, and that's what I'm looking forward to see ISRO defining more curiosity-driven projects in space.
Ajay Lele, a lot of this technology is, in fact, all of the critical technology is Indian. The cryogenic engines are Indian, the design is Indian, integration is Indian, the sensors are Indian. NASA gave us one sensor, but I mean, that was welcome. How is a lot of this technology stuff that no one will give us? And therefore, how is this such an important development from an indigenous technology standpoint?
I think India has learnt it in a hard way. In 1991-92 period, when India wanted cryogenic engine technology from Russia, India was refused that technology on a false pretext that you will violate the MTCR agreements. And that is the basic reason why India took on that challenge of developing the cryogenic technology. The other challenge which Indian scientists got when this, particularly the second mission, was supposed to be a joint venture between Russians and Indians, and actually Russians were supposed to give you the lander and a rover, but Russians at the fag end of around 2014-15 expressed their inability to do so. So Indian scientific community took on that challenge also. So if you really look at this entire system, your cryogenic engine is Indian. We had started developing cryogenic engines from 2001 onwards. We have undertaken 14-15 flights. Earlier 6 to 7 engines were the Russian engines. Then we had one engine which was based on Russian technology. Particularly during last 2 to 3 missions, we are having totally indigenously developed cryogenic engine. It has got a capacity to carry more amount of a weight. So one aspect is the rocket is Indian, and the entire orbital mission is Indian, as well as the lander and lunar is also Indian. You got all sensors also. You got 14 sensors, 13 of them are Indian sensors. So one can make out that it is out and out Indian technology demonstration.
And Pallav, you know, in as much as this is Indian technology to the T, and technology that is not something which other countries would give us, how is the science that ISRO generates from this mission something we would happily share with the rest of the world?
Certainly. ISRO Chairman Dr. Sivan told me very clearly that data from Chandrayaan 2 will be shared with the global scientific community. Again, I go back and say, India and Indian scientists are very large-hearted. Go back to Chandrayaan 1, India flew several instruments for NASA, ESA, all free of cost. Even on this one, India is flying a NASA instrument free of cost. But you don't see that being reciprocated by many other countries. America, they never reciprocate these things. They sent out a tweet saying they are supporting the Indian Chandrayaan 2 mission. Very few people know that India is actually paying for all the deep space network which India would be using. So it's not support. It is actually India is paying for that. So globally, India is very large-hearted with its data, and Chandrayaan 1 told the world and showed to the world that being large-hearted can help the global scientific community. Finding the presence of water molecules on the lunar surface changed the geological history of the moon once and for all. And the American instruments had been lying in America for several years, and NASA was not able to fly them. Carly Peters clearly told me that her instrument would not have flown to the moon had it not been for India's Chandrayaan 1. And Chandrayaan 1 changed everything for India. And then Mangalyaan came on, which gave, in the maiden attempt, India reached the orbit of Mars and subsequently gave the best images of the Mars full disk. So amazing things have happened, and even in Chandrayaan 2, there are 13 Indian scientific payloads. I met some of the scientists who have developed those payloads. They are very excited, and the global community is particularly excited. You know, Vishnu, I write for the Science magazine, and there a lot of global scientists are writing to me saying they are waiting to get the data from the Indian orbiter, Indian lander, and Indian rover. So Chandrayaan 2 data would be very important for the world because it paves the way, like someone on the panel said, for future colonization of the moon. So India paving the way for really the back to moon effort which America is talking about really came after Chandrayaan 1. And Chandrayaan 2 is a step in the right direction, just that it's 11 years too late. It should have happened a little earlier.
Well, I think, Pallav, you've been making this point, but it happened too late because Russia, which was supposed to help, didn't. So there was a delay in that process, right?
There was a delay. No, there have been several reasons for delay on the Chandrayaan 2, and not everything was in ISRO's control. And this is, as I say repeatedly, it is a sci-sat, it is not a spy-sat. It can happen at any moment. Science can always wait. While when you need to peer down on Rawalpindi and Balakot, that cannot wait. So Chandrayaan 2 is well worth waiting for 11 years to get it right. The instruments which India is sending to the moon are spectacular instruments, and the world should get some good data out of it.
Okay, I just want to go across to Dr. Srimati Kesan. She's the founder and CEO of Space Kids. Thanks very much for being with us. You know, you play such a big and such an important role in encouraging young minds to, you know, get an idea of what Indian scientists and engineers are doing. What kind of reception did you get from these children, from these young minds?
Oh my God, it's unbelievable. I must say hearty congratulations to the team ISRO, and the 1.3 billion Indians are super proud today. And my little angels, I should say, you wouldn't believe the amount of tears they had and the hugs and, you know, special kisses that I had from these kids. They were so overwhelmed, and they didn't want to leave the Indian flag that they were holding in their hand. And they said, oh my God, tomorrow we are going to make the country even more proud. You know, that's what I was looking in their eyes, and that's what I was expecting from their mouth, and they said it. So I'm super happy, and my day is made, I think.
Mr. Annadurai, would you like to reflect on that? You know, we're talking about engineering, we're talking about science, but if ISRO has been able to motivate young children to follow what they are doing, instill a sense of pride and perhaps an interest in science, then isn't it something which is so important over and above whatever else you are doing with rockets and satellites?
Exactly. I think I also resonate with that particular feeling because really 50 years back when Armstrong landed, and that landing made the whole of US pride, and the people who have seen that, the young minds, they only made the US such a big way in science and technology. So now, 50 years later, now when we are talking about our second back to the moon, when this happens, definitely it's going to be a big, another way of renaissance coming back in India. So now what happened 50 years back in US, I expect second landing. When I talk about second landing, this is the place where human colony is going to happen in the future. That means we are going to be the people first to have a man-made object from India going to the moon near the South Pole. So this will definitely ignite the minds, and already ignited. I have seen that across the board, from the youngster, from school to colleges. I think they have going. They very much inspired. I expect equal to what happened to Armstrong landing. 50 years from now, definitely Chandrayaan 2, when it softly lands on the moon, September 7th, definitely I expect an equal amount of enthusiasm among the Indian youths taking the India to the up and up in the science and technology.
And Dr. Chaitanya Giri, you know, you were with us the other night at 2 a.m. in the morning, and then you know, it didn't work out that day. It's worked out brilliantly now. Would you like to reflect on how the payload that we are carrying is absolutely world class? That this is not just a question of somehow or the other making our way to the moon's surface, but actually in using payloads which are absolutely world class to hopefully get path breaking results. This is an immensely sophisticated mission. Which just so happens to be our first one on the surface of the moon.
Yeah, undoubtedly. We have Chandrayaan 2 is carrying world-class payloads, some on the orbiter, some on the lander, some on the rover, and it's a suite of instruments that is complementary to each other. So no instrument is actually duplicating the other instrument's results, But what they are doing is they are complementing, they are supplementing to the results found by the partner instruments. What I can say more about is that once we land on the moon, at the south pole of the moon, the lander and the rover will experience ultra low temperatures that will fall below minus 200 degrees Celsius. And at those temperatures, if we are able to find out chemistry happening on the surface of the moon, that will be a revelation in itself. Because, for instance, in our daily lives, why do we use refrigerators? We use refrigerators to preserve perishable items, food items. And assuming that cold temperatures control a lot of chemical reactions, unwanted chemical reactions. But here on the surface of the moon, when temperatures are so below, what's happening is not just simple chemistry, but quantum tunneled ultra cold chemistry. So if we are able to find some chemical reactions happening on that surface, that will be a big revelation for in pure sciences, particularly in pure chemistry and in pure physics. And what will happen eventually is that the science that comes out of Chandrayaan will trickle down in several scientific mega projects that India is currently undertaking. Let me count on my fingers. The first big science mega project that India is participating is the Square Kilometer Array.
Yes.
That's the biggest radio telescope to be coming in the world, in which India is a member country. Number 2 is the 30-meter telescope, which will come about in Hawaii. And this 30-meter telescope will also look for such exotic chemistry. So the science, it might be a bit more far into the future, but it will have ramifications for the scientific and technology infrastructure that India is building for itself and for the world.
You mentioned, Dr. Giri, about India's involvement now in several of these international projects. That's important. Indian scientists are making their mark in so many areas. Dr. Srimati Kesan, would you like to reflect on another aspect of ISRO, that this is an organization which has encouraged women to lead, in this case, right from the front. 2 women leading the Chandrayaan 2 mission. But this is done not just on an equal opportunity basis, but it's done where talent, ability and results actually come to the fore. If you can deliver on this, then ISRO will back you. Isn't this welcome in an organization in India, and isn't this really inspirational?
Absolutely. I mean, being a woman, I think I would say a salute to both the women. And in fact, I was reading an article where Vinita was actually forced, or rather cajoled, to take up this position. She was not really willing to come up, but in fact, Dr. Annadurai is here. I'm so happy that I read the article that he was so, he identified the efficiency of both these women, and he made sure that they are on the forefront. And I understand that keeping family and work-life balance, it's so difficult for women to do this in STEM, but they have proved it all today, owing to giving them this position. I think all the men in the country, we are really proud of you for identifying these 2 strong women, because generally there is a saying that women in STEM are not too good. Okay. And today they have broken all the barriers, and they have proved to the whole world that women are on par. And
absolutely, and we've got a lovely story which we'll play out in a while from now. But I'm also joined by Dr. Nambi Narayanan. Thanks very much for being with us, an old hand at ISRO, and somebody who knows about cryogenic engine technology as well as anybody in this country. Would you like to talk to us a little bit, Dr. Narayanan, about the cryogenic engine we now have? It's an Indian engine. It's something which involved profound engineering risks. But where we were in the early 90s to where we are now, as far as that cryogenic engine is concerned, can you tell us the strides we've made?
Well, we started with a contract with Russia on what is called KBD 100. That was a small engine. That's the first cryogenic engine we were trying to build, but that contract didn't go through fully, and so we have to break the contract. Then this engine what we are talking now is again based on a gas generator cycle, and this was a larger thrust and higher propellant loading. Now I don't want to go into the technical details of the engine, but the whole thing is it works well, and it has a very high specific impulse of its class in the world. Then we, as you know very well, last time we had a small snag. Now that snag was apparently a small leak in the helium bottle, it appears. Now, so that was rectified quickly, and then we went through this exercise. Within a week we could rectify it, and then now we are ready to take the launch, and then we successfully launched it. And I think as long as this is in the orbit, Earth's orbit, first phase of the work is done. Now we have to wait for the maneuvers and then take the Chandrayaan to the lunar orbit.
Right.
From there we have to soft land it. According to me, the next criticality is the soft landing on the moon.
Right, and in fact,
that
I wanted
is what
to talk
we have
to
not done so far.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to Ajay Lele about that. How difficult will that be? You know, we keep saying 15 minutes of terror. I think we need to explain this to our audience as well. That 15 minutes of terror actually refers to the process where the lander is on its way to the surface of the moon after detaching itself from the orbiter, and a certain velocity has to be maintained. The speed has to actually come down very substantially within a finite period of time. Just before it touches down, makes a soft landing, retro thrusters have to fire to ensure that the speed goes down completely and it's able to land without damaging any of its components. That sounds very easy, right? I just said it all. But what makes it difficult?
But the issue is that if you look at globally, as per the global statistics also concerned, almost 50 to 52% of missions have only been successful in this area. So one must understand
50 to 60%.
50
right.
to 52%.
50 to 52, right.
So one must understand how critical this activity is going to be. You take the case of recent missions. So let's not talk of the past. The Israeli mission.
Yep.
Israel is supposed to be very good as far as science and technology, particularly the technological aspects are concerned. But in the April, just 2 months back, their mission also collapsed. They had a good launch. Their mission reached up to the lunar orbit. Subsequently, when they landed onto the surface of the moon, instead of a soft landing, it became a hard landing. The system crashed onto the surface of the moon. There were a certain amount of problems with the engine. They had understood that there is a problem. They activated the plan B, but by that time it was too late. So when we are talking of a 15 minutes of a terror, that means you don't have any margin to make any sort of a mistakes. You have to bring the velocity down to zero.
Yeah.
Then only you are going to have a soft landing.
Right.
Now the aspect of a soft landing also your orbiter is going to take over, particularly identifying, because we roughly know which is the area where we are going to land. But the orbiter is going to do further analysis and identify the exact location, because you will not have problems only with the velocity part of it. There is a lunar dust also. If suppose you do a slightly hard landing and that dust starts floating around, then when your rover is going to come out, I think that could be one of the reasons why it is going to take 4 hours for the rover to come out from the lander after the soft landing is over. There could be a possibility that there could be certain amount of I really don't know whether to call it as a lunar haze or something, but maybe the lunar dust could create certain amount of problems as far as the activities of a rover, the sensors of a rovers are concerned. So it is going to be extremely critical in every aspect of it.
Mr. Raghunandan, what about redundancies built into the system? Because it's not just one system which has to operate. Many systems do need to operate, but there is a system in place to ensure that if something goes wrong, there are backup plans. Tell us about the redundancies on board the orbiter, the lander, and perhaps even the rover.
The tricky part, which we've just heard about, is the lander. In the lander, there are multiple rockets.
Right.
So the multiple rockets do help in building the redundancies that you spoke of. A couple of rockets specifically have been placed in order to tackle this problem of rising dust
Yes.
from the moon's
Oh, I see.
surface, and 2 of those rockets will help to mitigate that problem. But I would not really call them total redundancies, in the sense if a system fails, then you have another one to back it. On the lander, that is certainly
That's
not
not
the
there.
case.
Yeah.
And the rover, there's just the one rover.
Yes.
It has very small power, just 50 watts of solar panel power to operate on. It can cover about 500 meters through
its life, right?
Through its life, which is 2 Earth days or
Yeah.
1 lunar day. So there's not that much redundancy, and part of the problem of not being able to create more redundancies is the weight problem, which we've spoken about earlier.
Yeah.
Since there is a limitation to the total weight that our GSLV Mark III can carry,
Yeah.
we are limited in building capacities and redundancy systems in the lander and the orbiter, as well as the rover.
As the rover itself. Dr. Chaitanya Giri, just out of curiosity, why would the rover, which is called Pragyan, have a life of only about 48 hours?
No, 14 days.
14 days. Why would it have just 14 days? Why, with its solar panels, would it not be able to last longer?
Space is a very drastic environment. You are continuously bombarded with solar radiation, cosmic radiation, GCRs, galactic cosmic rays, and such environments take a toll on electronics. And the smaller your probe, the more it is prone and vulnerable to radiations, because the smaller the size, the cross section of that probe is also smaller, and that's one reason. Secondly, if we really want to elongate the time periods of our space probes, then we'll have to move from solar powered space probes to those that are powered by radioisotope thermoelectric generators, that is nuclear energy. So there is scope for improvement, not just in that, but also with the lander. This time the Vikram lander is going with chemical propulsion retro boosters. This is something which is not conducive for payloads that are measuring organic molecules or any other molecules, because the chemical propulsion that is emitted out of these propellants, they come into the measurements, they
Yes.
interfere with the measurements. So to avoid that, my suggestion would be that the next time when we go on the moon, let's go with electric propulsion.
All right. We are also joined at this stage from the United States by Dr. Amitabh Ghosh, a leading scientist with NASA, and Alok Chatterjee, who is the mission interface manager at NASA JPL. He was in fact part of the team that helped discover water on the surface of the moon. Dr. Ghosh, to you first, how is the success of the launch being viewed by scientists at NASA?
Community is very supportive. It's more collaborative than competitive. So I think everybody is very happy for any country that lands or any country. But it's important to remember that the critical step is perhaps the landing, which is in September. And so I think everybody is focused on the landing. I think it's a huge boost to brand India. I think it's a huge boost to development of human resources at different levels. The people who develop these instruments can work in different fields in the Indian economy. It can motivate students. Some misconceptions which I heard before, the reason the rover perhaps will not survive more than 14 days or 1 lunar day is because the lunar night is very cold. And so perhaps it doesn't have the capability to last the lunar night. The Chinese rover, which is right now on the ground, does survive the lunar night. And the other thing which I heard is that the sharing of data is really a international practice. NASA has a website where it puts all its mission data. So it's an international protocol, and India is also is really staying up and providing its data again with other countries. And the other thing is, it's also normal protocol for countries to fly instruments for free. So NASA flies instruments for Germany and vice versa. The ESA flies NASA instruments for free. So nobody is supposed to charge. It's supposed to be no transfer of funds basis.
Pallav, you have a point to make. Go ahead.
Certainly. 2 points. I think the rover is built to last one lunar day. That's a nominal period. It may well last longer than that. Go back to Mangalyaan. The nominal period for Mangalyaan was 6 months. It has continued for many years after that. As far as sharing of data goes, I think a colleague from NASA is not being right about it. NASA, what it does is, the first look of the data is shared with the principal investigator who makes that instrument, and only a year later sometimes they share the data. Whereas Dr. Sivan clearly said to me that India would share the data almost immediately. So unlike NASA, which shares data, yes, but the first look is given to the principal investigator. In this case, it is being given to everybody. That is what Dr. Sivan told me very clearly. And as far as flying free instruments go back to 2000, go back to Chandrayaan 1. India was under technology denial, India was under sanctions, and yet Indians were able to fly instruments for America, where America was constantly denying technology to India for a very long time. The Indo-US civilian nuclear deal came much later. The Chandrayaan 1 mission
I think we are getting confused here.
For that came earlier.
Okay, Dr. Ghosh, go ahead with the point you're making. Yes.
Right. So I think, NASA puts out an open call. Any country can respond to that call. And I don't think any country is specifically blocked out. Technology transfer is a very different area. So that is a very different area. There are State Department protocols. And the other point he made is the crux is the data sharing is almost immediate. NASA has a website. You can go and check it out. It's called Planetary Data PDS. And the data is probably put in the public domain in 3 months or 6 months. So I think these are very minor points. The big story, of course, is that this mission was successful. The international community is very positively looking forward to it.
Yep.
This puts India in a very different league of countries, which are capable of such superior technology development projects. This is incredibly complex. And this is also a story of how successful ISRO is as an organization, from where it has come for the last 20 years.
Sure. And I want to go across to Alok Chatterjee. Would you like to reflect a little bit on the, on ISRO itself? And, we were discussing this earlier on in the day, that a lot of the scientists and engineers at ISRO come from a very modest background. They've gone through very basic schools, not necessarily in the big cities. They've gone through government colleges, but they've had a dream which ISRO has allowed them to achieve. And even if our educational institutes aren't in the top 100 in the world, not at all, how is this a testament to, something right, something good about our engineering and science, something which has resulted in some fairly world-class engineers at ISRO?
True. My experience with ISRO goes back to the 1973 when I joined there, and a lot of the engineers and scientists were not from the premium institutions. Some were, but not majority of them were not, and they were still excellent people. They worked miracles in terms of developing technology and carrying out missions, starting from the Rohini rockets, the SLV-3, the ASLV, PSLV, GSLV Mark 1, 2, and 3. So you can see the step-by-step process of improvement, and India has a very large pool of skilled skilled people who can carry out this very, very complex mission. And it's true in general all over NASA. It doesn't have to be from MIT or Caltech or Stanford all the time. We do have a fair share of them, but we have people from very ordinary colleges, so-called ordinary colleges. But it's the compassion, it's the commitment, it's the leadership that really counts. And I think India is blessed, at least ISRO is blessed with that kind of an organization, very strong leadership. Some organizations do make mistakes, but that's part of the game. It's not a big deal. I think ISRO is making steady progress under all kinds of denials, and I think the people, the people of ISRO are, I'm currently working on a collaboration with ISRO on the NISAR mission, and day to day, we find at JPL very, very competent, talented people, technically, as good as anybody in the world.
Right,
and
I
we
just
are making very good progress.
Right, and I just need to take a short break, but I wanted after that play out a story of the leadership of this mission in ISRO, the women leaders who've played such a big role so far and who will really be in the spotlight and in the hot seat right until this mission proves to be successful. That's what we hope. I'd like to thank all our panelists very much for joining us this evening. We're going to come back and play out that story for you, so don't go away.